Hey, welcome back. So, when you open a book of poetry, what are you really looking for? Are you trying to decode the author's secret message, get a peek into their deepest feelings? Or is it something else entirely? Today, we're going to dive deep into that very question. How should we actually read a poem? And who better to start with than the legendary beat poet, Allen Ginsberg? Here he is, basically saying his poetry is the real deal. It's raw, authentic emotion, a direct line to his true self, not some phony, packaged, canned plastic you get from the mainstream. And that's pretty much the classic view of art, right? It's a pure, unfiltered expression of the person who made it. But hold on, what if we're looking at this all wrong? What if we decided that Ginsberg's real feelings just don't matter at all? It's a wild idea, I know, but it's one that completely flipped literary analysis on its head, and it's exactly what we're going to explore. To even begin to challenge that classic idea, we're going to need a totally different set of tools. So, let's open up what we'll call the postmodernist toolkit and find a whole new way of reading. Okay, the first and honestly the most famous tool in this box is called the death of the author. This idea comes from a French theorist named Roland Barthes back in 1967, and it was a huge deal because for centuries, critics were obsessed with digging through an author's life to find the one true meaning of their work. Barthes said, nope, once the work is out in the world, the author effectively dies, and it's up to you, the reader, to bring it to life and create its meaning. And you can really see the clash here. On one side, you have authorial intent, which basically treats the author like a king, who holds the one and only key to a story's meaning. But on the other side, the death of the author theory comes along and completely dethrones them. It says the text is its own little universe, and you, the reader, get to be the one who explores it and decides what it means. Now, I know postmodernism can get really complicated and sometimes pretty controversial. So our goal for this explainer is to do what our source material calls sieving for gold. We're going to sift through all these ideas, trying to find the truly valuable insights, the perks, while also being honest about the parts that don't quite work, the penalties. This table really shows the massive shift in thinking from what came before modernism to postmodernism. Now, don't get hung up on all the jargon here. The main takeaway is the overall vibe. See, modernism was all about finding a single, deep meaning, a root system with one big story. But postmodernism? It's all about playing on the surface. It moves away from closed, serious forms to open, playful ones. It's a shift from a rigid hierarchy to something more like, well, anarchy, where fragmentation is actually seen as a kind of freedom. All right, so theory is one thing, but let's see how this toolkit actually works in the real world. We're going to apply it to our first test case, the incredible and famously private poet, Emily Dickinson. We start with these lines, and they are just burning with passion, right? Reading this, your mind immediately goes to her life story, her famous isolation, or secret relationships. It feels so intensely personal, it just screams out for a reading that focuses on the author. And right away, we hit our first penalty. If we just kill the author here, we risk completely ignoring the crucial fact that Emily Dickinson was a woman writing in the incredibly restrictive world of 19th century America. Her context, her struggle just to have a voice, all of that gets flattened and lost if we decide the author doesn't matter. But here's the perk. That postmodern love of fragmentation helps us see her unique style in a whole new light. Her famous hyphens, her choppy syntax, suddenly they don't look like mistakes. You can see them as a deliberate, even liberating choice to shatter rigid rules and structures, which is a key postmodern idea. Okay, now let's take that same toolkit and apply it to a poet who could not be more different, the loud, public, and absolutely revolutionary Allen Ginsberg. Wow, this quote is just a bombshell. Here's Ginsberg himself drawing a straight line from Moloch, that monstrous figure in his epic poem Howl, directly to the personal trauma of his mother's lobotomy. He's practically handing us his authorial intent on a silver platter. And this is a massive penalty for the whole death of the author idea. Howl is so deeply tangled up with Ginsberg's life. His identity as a gay man, his mother's tragedy, the famous obscenity trial over the poem itself. To ignore all that isn't just missing a little context. It feels like you're ripping out the very soul of the poem. And yet, there's a perk here too. The postmodern toolkit is actually the perfect thing for analyzing the form of Howl. The poem is this wild, chaotic, flowing masterpiece. It mashes up high and low culture, and it's a searing critique of the consumerist mass media world of the 1950s, what some thinkers called hyper-reality. I mean, just look at how Ginsberg builds this modern-day monster, Moloch. He isn't some ancient god from a myth. He's made of ash cans and unobtainable dollars, and his blood is running money. This is exactly the kind of wild collision of the epic and the everyday, the sacred and the profane, that postmodern's theory gives us the language to unpack. It helps us make sense of the beautiful chaos. So, we've sieved through the theory, we've run it through our test cases, and we've seen the perks and the penalties. So, what's the final verdict on all this? Well, the source paper gives us this fantastic, if maybe a little gruesome, metaphor. To understand the challenge of literary analysis, picture this. We're trying to dissect a living frog. Okay, let's break this down. The poem itself is the living frog. It's full of life and energy and meaning. But if you just let it be, you can't really study it. The pins are what hold it in place. Those are the stable facts, like the author's life and the historical context. Without those pins, the argument goes, the frog, the poem's meaning, just leaps away into this interpretive free-for-all, where anything can mean anything. And that really brings us to the big takeaway here. Maybe we don't have to choose between the author and the text. Maybe the best approach is a balanced one. We can use the really powerful tools of postmodernism to look at form and language and structure without having to completely throw the artist's life and world in the trash. And in the end, we come full circle, right back to Allen Ginsberg. He reminds us that poetry at its core is about connection. It's about a poet taking their own raw, honest, private world and making it public so that all of us can feel and experience it too. Which leaves us with one final thought-provoking question. Maybe the real statement shouldn't be, the author is dead. Maybe it's more like, the author is dead, long live the author. The author doesn't need to disappear entirely, but their role as the absolute, unquestionable ruler of meaning can, and probably should, change. So, what do you think?